How does a banana trigger a CIA-backed coup? Do AirPods herald the arrival of a new global order? What do LED lights say about the future of humanity? I'm Ed Conway, and in each episode of my new podcast, Stuff Matters, I take an object, crack it open, and reveal the world-shaping forces hidden inside. This is economics told through the things we think we understand. Search Stuff Matters on your podcast app to listen and follow.
Hello, good morning, welcome. It's Monday, July the 13th and the start of Keir Starmer's last week as Prime Minister. He'll be in Paris for a meeting about Ukraine and a chance to bid farewell to allies on the world stage. My name is Anne McElvoy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates of Sky News. At 8 o'clock tonight, his successor, Andy Burnham, will take questions from members of the Parliamentary Labour Party in a one-man hustings. Remember, not a single person in that room other than Andy Burnham will know if they're going to get a job from him in a week's time. So brave is the MP that tackles him hard.
Labour MPs will be logging in remotely for an hour of questions, and the sole candidate to lead the Labour Party gets a minute to answer each one. So this is really a bit of a mass speed date. It's a session being moderated by the PLP chair, Jessica Morden, and lots will be drawn to decide who asks the questions. In the big moving story of the day, Playbook hears we could get statements or at least comments about the murder of one of Britain's most well-known politicians, reforms, and Widdecombe, formerly of the Conservative Party. That dominated the weekend's agenda. And no doubt the week ahead too.
A 28-year-old white British national was arrested on Saturday night on suspicion of murder. Devon and Cornwall police said on Sunday that detectives were open-minded about a potential motive, but there's nothing to suggest it was politically inspired at this stage. The man remains in police custody, and police are asking people not to speculate about any possible motive. Multiple newspaper reports suggest that the suspect drove 267 miles from his Rotherham home to the former MP's bungalow in Devon.
And this also plays into a wider debate about reform and its security. Rhetorical tension has been rising there. Deputy Leader Richard Tice telling The Times it's as though someone in the establishment wants us dead, while Zia Youssef was claiming that none of the government, the Speaker, nor the police care at all about the security of reform MPs. That is, of course, considerably rebutted by those close to the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle. And there are arguments, however, about safeguards, about panic alarms. Is that enough, particularly for those as high profile as their party's key figures? And Zia Youssef's claim is that reform MPs are having to supplement this with their own measures.
But of course, quite quickly, this all gets bound up with the argument that's also going on in parallel to Nigel Farage's £5 million gift that he was given to by Christopher Harborne, which he maintains was necessary to fund private security for the rest of his life. And that's one of the gifts that he's under investigation for failing to declare to the parliamentary authorities, even though it came in the 12 months before he was elected as MP to Clacton in 2024. And it's part of the reasoning, the investigation that Nigel Farage gave for triggering a by-election last week, which is going on in that Essex constituency at the moment.
At the weekend, Nigel Farage visiting the scene of Anne Widdecombe's murder, he came in for criticism, Sam, after he said that he did believe that Widdecombe's death was premeditated murder. Harvey Proctor, former Tory MP and close friend of Anne Widdecombe, telling The Times he thought it was disappointing for Farage to be speculating about the motive in this way. The Reform leader countering that he was really careful not to be political in what he said. So opinions do differ strongly on that. But it struck me that for Reform, seeing those images of the wreath laying, this was also a show of strength in grief at the death of a senior party member, someone who'd come over to the ranks of the Farage political army from the Conservatives in a long career as a prominent person on the right of the Conservative Party. The context is, however, a testing week for Nigel Farage over some of its more opaque funding mechanisms. That's where we left the story last week, Sam. It's still in the air, but are there any actual developments?
The by-election campaign is now firmly underway, but it's been played out in proxy elsewhere, including in the Commons, particularly over the issue of donations. Tomorrow, two Labour MPs, Alex Sobel and Stella Creasy, are going to change or try and change the rules around donations. They're tabling amendments to the Representation of the People Bill in an effort to cap funding at either £1 million for Sobel or £100,000 for Creasy, respectively. Now, these are important big moves, but Downing Street doesn't support them, so the whip won't be with either of those two Labour MPs. So they're unlikely to go through, despite Andy Burnham sort of in the past suggesting that he would support some kind of lower cap for donations. But this all plays into the current context, with a Reform source telling the Telegraph that Labour MPs will be voting to put the lives of Reform politicians in danger less than a week after the murder of a Reform politician. Of course, the two Labour MPs tabling the amendment rejected the claim, with Creasy saying that she'd work with any MP to determine security measures and that it shouldn't be a question of finding donors to pay.
The other big area today is for Shabana Mahmood, who hopes to stay in her post as Home Secretary. Immigration and removal still top of the agenda there. And she has two very tricky tasks to combine. One is for today and one is for the weeks ahead. Today in the Commons, Mahmood is expected to lay out the legal steps to deport the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang, who has been freed from prison. And he was stripped of his British citizenship following his conviction for multiple sexual offences over many years. Shabir Ahmad was jailed for 22 years in 2012 on multiple counts of child sexual offences, including rape, but released from prison on licence earlier this month. Now, he can't be deported as things stand due to a 1971 piece of legislation that forbids the removal of a small group of Commonwealth citizens who arrived in the UK more than 50 years ago. Mahmood is, however, expected to say she's found a way to close that loophole without jeopardising the right to remain of other Commonwealth citizens, including the Windrush generation from the Caribbean, after that controversy there about their rights to remain a few years ago. So Andy Burnham has made clear, however, he does want the law changed. This is a very specific case and distressing context, but Mahmood finds herself under pressure to deliver a rapid deportation on the one hand, but she's also under gathering pressure from backbenchers to soften her approach in other areas. Sam?
Yeah, no, it's tricky under both. Even if they change the law and it's not clear what happens then, because Pakistan say that they won't accept him back, and he says that he's renounced his Pakistani citizenship. So we're still in a bit of a sort of quagmire. The suggestion is that maybe some diplomacy could convince Pakistan to change their mind, but that could or possibly won't be quick. So it'll be an incremental advance in this story rather than the end of it, I suspect, today. The other big problem for Shabana Mahmood is how to backtrack with elegance parts of her immigration proposals. Now, a possible compromise for that makes the front page of the Times. Matt Dathan suggesting that foreign workers who arrive with their families, who arrived after 2021, could actually be given indefinite leave to remain after 5 years instead of her proposed 10. But, and here's where the sort of compromise zone lies, they could face waiting longer to qualify for benefits. So if you remember, Mahmood originally wanted to double the time it takes to qualify for indefinite leave to remain for 5 years to a decade. And that would give you, the ILR would give you access to welfare, including housing support, universal credit, disability payments, council tax reductions, and the like. And actually saving money was a big part of Mahmood's case for doing this. She sort of put the fiscal arguments front and centre of why she thought she needed to do this. So it's perhaps unsurprising that that really, I think she would argue, you still get much of the savings that you that she promised under this proposed compromise, which hasn't been confirmed, but I'm sure is on the money. And under this, migrants who gain leave to remain would have to wait a further few years until they can claim access to the benefits, maybe a couple more years. And the waiting time would also apply to refugees. So given that Andy Burnham is under pressure really from the wing of the Labour Party that's installing him in number 10. He's expected to move a bit on this if he keeps Shabab Mahmood as Home Secretary, even though he's indicated he would keep really the thrust of the rest of the Mahmood proposals.
And really this week is all about waiting for Burnham Wood to come south, finally arrive. My colleague Dan Bloom has a monumental read on what his team are hoping to spend their last of week preparing for power on, and that is fundamentally the plans to reshape Whitehall at the heart of his agenda. And Dan reports that Burnham's allies are discussing a potential big bang early on, one of them recalling Gordon Brown's sudden 1997 announcement that Bank of England would be made independent, said he wants that Bank of England moment. There's a good deal on the devolution agenda. Now, Miata Fanbulla, in an interview earlier in July, said that someone who'd worked on devolution for a decade and a half, it had been a tortuous fight, her words, because ultimately you're extracting power and resources from people who wield power and resources. And there's a detail there in Dan Bloom's piece about the progress towards a digital campus in Manchester, but also the fact that it wouldn't open until 2032, which just goes to show that when it comes to that reawakening of the North in terms of changing how the bureaucracy works there, and also taking perhaps more account of the digital era as well as just moving officials around, there is no overnight solution here. I've been trying to figure out tortuously, as Miata might put it, what the public ownership push might look like, Sam, under Andy Burnham, because that is potentially one of those Gordon Brown breakthrough kind of moments.
Yeah, I think there's a huge tension here between how quickly you're able to deliver results and how much of the kind of structural change that you want to do. I'm quite struck. I was talking to Miasa Fanbulla as well. And, nothing is off the table. I asked her what she thought of Wes Streeting's NHS England reforms. And my goodness, did she give them sort of, frankly, quite short shrift. She said, I understand why he did it. And I think it's done now. And then she went on to say that she thinks it was a missed opportunity. Why on earth aren't we integrating health structures with what we're creating with integrated care boards, ICBs in the jargon? So basically smash those together, local authority structures and health requirements. So not only is that a bit of an interesting rebuke, but it also shows that, people are feeding in policy to Andy Burnham are sort of itching to do sort of lots and lots of rewiring.
That's a very interesting difference of opinion there. It goes to show that this kind of virtual, perhaps sort of vague kind of stuff on what you're trying to do with devolution of powers does have very direct effects on how you run public services. And I think that's one to bookmark, because I think we will see a lot of tension going forward about that balance. And relatedly, Sam, I've been trying to figure out tortuously, as Miata might put it, what a public ownership push might look like. We know that there's interest in that, particularly in the utilities, water companies in the frame there for the incoming Burnham government. What would it look like? How would the cost be borne? Either way, we're in for a big infrastructure overhaul in water, and the cost of that, one way or the other, would fall on consumers unless there was an absolutely massive state of government subsidy. So it depends how adversarial the government really wants to be on that. I was just talking to a couple of people in and around the water industry, one very against any form of public ownership, one who was a bit more tolerant of it, just pointing out that there is a big difference here between the performance of private equity companies who've come in for a lot of criticism for the way that they've been running the water industry, and those that are listed and accountable to shareholders. Would a Burnham government, for instance, make a distinction there before it went on some sort of public accountability drive? And what would that look like? Which I suppose is just another example, a bit like healthcare, as you point out, where you campaign in poetry, but you very much govern in the gritty prose when it comes to making sweeping changes.
Yeah, quite a lot of the sort of people around Burnham like to hone in on the kinds of private equity owned public service providers. I'm thinking, for instance, of social care as well, where care homes are, sort of care homes for profit are, I think, definitely in the sights of those trying to help Andy Burnham with policy. Another example is special educational needs private schools that can charge tens and tens and tens of thousands of pounds a year, much more than sort of, as it were, quote unquote, average private schools. Those sorts of things, I think, people who typically support Andy Burnham are absolutely itching to do. But I think you put your finger on the completely the right point, which is how on earth do you distinguish one from the other in law and in company structures so that you can only have good owners and not bad owners? That's simply not how capitalism works, and all of that is tricky. I do think that there's been a political resistance to, for instance, nationalising Thames Water, both under Steve Reed and subsequently under Emma Reynolds. And if the personnel in those briefs change, then it makes it much more easy to start the process of doing that, even though the big kind of fiscal challenges remain. But I think one of the big questions flowing from Andy Burnham's speech a week ago was when he distinguishes good growth and, by implication, sort of noting that there is a thing called bad growth, a little bit like Ed Miliband's predators and producers when it comes to capitalism. Is it really practical to draw a line between the two, and doesn't going after one really end up hurting the other? And
also, if you're talking about the animal spirits, so it's just interesting. I was just smiling there because I was just about to come in and say, yes, that reminds me of predators and producers. That it's now getting on a while since Ed Miliband used that phrase, but that is the kind of language that I think is often seen as rather off-putting to investors, because they do worry that if they fall politically on the wrong side of a line, however well or badly they may be running their businesses, that they'll suddenly find themselves being dished for basically pursuing a capitalist model that the government allowed them into and then turned on them. I do think, however, I just keep poking away at this and intend to do a bit more research on it. I think there is a desire to take on private equity in the water industry. Could you make that distinction between private equity and listed companies based crudely on the distinction in their performance? Is it going to be straightforward? No. But is it part of this idea of having a sort of Bank of England moment? Well, it's certainly in the frame, just to judge by some people I've been speaking to in the background there. And let's say the water companies also feel that they need to get lawyered up and ready for that fight. So I think that's something we could return to in the next weeks and months when we get a change of a Labour leader and a new Prime Minister.
It's going to be about 2 weeks worth of stuff after Andy Burnham comes in, taking us to the end of July, which will feel quite kinetic. I read that over the weekend. And the question is what? There have been some suggestions of an emergency budget. I read that as well. But just a reminder that the Office of Budget Responsibility requires 10 weeks notice before you have a budget. Which rules out something on that scale. The first, even if Andy Burnham triggered it the day he came in, the first day you could have a budget is Monday, the September the 28th, which is slap bang in the middle of Labour conference. So in reality, it as we were saying last week, it's October. But if the stories in the FT and Bloomberg are true, and they want to combine the first budget with the first spending review, well, that really does take time, particularly if you've rewired the top of Whitehall and government departments. So all of that is just starting to get tricky again. And this is the debate that Keir Starmer had in 2024. So did they end up just being dragged into the same position as then? In theory, Andy Burnham could do some changes in the first couple of weeks without a budget, maybe some tax reductions. But given the already squeezed headroom that you're going to get from the Iran conflict that's still ongoing, there is a risk if the markets think that these things are unfunded. So that's the set of challenges that he faces, but we're in for quite a loud opening to his premiership. Notable, Anne, that there's a lot of speculation, not really very many hard facts. So I think the one thing that we can definitively say about Andy Burnham's close-knit team at the moment is that they have managed to prevent very many leaks, which is more than you could ever say, even at the height of his power, about Keir Starmer.
What absolutely dispiriting news for journalists. But you're right. Everything you just said there depends a lot on who the message carrier is going to be in number 11, doesn't it? And they have still managed, for all the speculation, people are sure that they know it's Ed Miliband or sure that they know it's someone else, to keep their cards close to their chest. I just thought, as we're getting towards our sign-off time, as our 20 minutes this morning, I have a picture scoop that has just come in on my phone. I thought I might like to share with you. And it's actually from a German colleague called Jochen Bittner, an excellent correspondent at Die Zeit newspaper. He reports, scoop from Manchester. Site reporter manages to get a picture of Andy's magic jacket before it goes on display. So this is the famous sort of zip-up Oasis style jacket, which I think is going on display up in that Manchester museum as a key element in the rise of Andy Burnham, the zip-up navy trendy dad jacket, which he claims to have the first picture before it goes into the archive of the nation.
Okay, that's it from us for this morning. Interesting note, the Prime Minister is actually going to stay in Paris overnight tonight and attend the Bastille Day celebrations tomorrow, meaning that I'm not sure what happens to his final cabinet meeting with colleagues. We'll no doubt find out whether it's been delayed or cancelled altogether. Maybe, Anne, he just doesn't want to see them after everything that's happened, unlike me and you, because we'll be back tomorrow, where I'm delighted to say I'll be seeing you then.
How does a banana trigger a CIA-backed coup? Do AirPods herald the arrival of a new global order? What do LED lights say about the future of humanity? I'm Ed Conway, and in each episode of my new podcast, Stuff Matters, I take an object, crack it open, and reveal the world-shaping forces hidden inside. This is economics told through the things we think we understand. Search Stuff Matters on your podcast app to listen and follow.